to Sisterhood Checkin. I am your author and coach, Nadira Lewis. And I'm excited that each of you have joined me each and every Friday here on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. As I began my journey from the beginning, from 4 years ago to now, I'm so appreciative of each and every one of you that join me each and every Friday to hear what's in my little bitty heart. And I'm excited about today because this has been a topic that I was just thinking about. I was working during the day and the topic came to me and it just really had me thinking. I was doing some studying and I just couldn't get this topic out of my mind. So I wanted to kind of get into some details about this topic. But before I get into this topic, if you are watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button so that you can be notified every time I upload new videos. Now, if you are watching us on Instagram and you are watching us on Facebook, make sure you click like and share. And if you're watching us on Twitch and TikTok, make sure you click like and share if you're blessed by the content that I have been sharing each and every week. So today, before I actually get into the topic, we're going to play this quick video. And I want you to call up your girlfriends and tell them Sisterhood Check-In is on the air. We'll be right back after this.
Sometimes it's not enough to be reminded that Jesus hasn't left you or forgotten you. We need to declare it over ourselves, over others. No matter the season you may find yourself in, no matter the depths of darkness you're wading through, you can join him in declaring the truth. That God is light upon your feet, whether or not you can see the next step. That God is your strength, even though the weight of life seems to be crushing you down. And that when your job, your marriage, your relationship, your health feels like it's coming to a dead end, and make dead things live again. These are his promises, and they're the only thing you need to declare over your life. So as you step into this next season or this next moment, you can declare that God's not done with you. He's just getting started. You can declare that the good work that he has started in you, he will surely complete it. You can declare that the same God that parted the seas goes before you, goes behind you. You can declare these promises over your life, over your family's life, over the people passing on the street. You can declare these truths over every circumstance, over every season of your life. You can declare that every day belongs to him and every new breath belongs to him. Because we have the power of a living God living inside of us. And this is our declaration.
Whoa. I don't know about y'all, but every time I hear that video and I hear that last part that says we have this testimony that the living God dwells on the inside of it. This is our declaration. Every time I hear that, I get excited because when you really start to walk with God and you start to allow him to really reveal himself to you, the more and more you hear a statement, something like that, it just like swells up on the inside of you because it becomes like revelation. It becomes like dunamis power on the inside of you because every time he reveals himself, every time he shares something that enlightens you in his word, it gets you to that place where you just feel like you want to explode, just being able to have access to a living God. So thanks for each and every one of you that are watching. Today's topic, we're going to talk about what will your legacy? What will be your legacy? And when you think about legacy, most people, when you ask most people what is their legacy that they're leaving behind, they always tend to start out with just the financial part. Now, don't get me wrong, the financial part is important. We need money, we need resources to be able to live on this earth. That's just the way it's set up. You can't get around that. And you want to be able to make sure that your family is secure. But the legacy that I want to talk about today is a little bit more, just as important. Um, I would say equal and vitally important, because when I started to really think about this topic, when I thought about the title, What Will Be Your Legacy? It kind of came out of a study that I was doing, and I was going over Ecclesiastics. And for some of you who have read the book of Ecclesiastics, there's so much stuff that I learned from Solomon. I've been really doing like a in-depth study on Solomon, because Solomon was one of the wisest men, right, that God talked about, right? He was one of the wisest. God said there's nobody that's as wise as him before him, and that will be after him. So I really kind of was like delving into the wisdom that Solomon was given. And one of the things that I've learned is, though he asked God in such a in a humble at a humble time in his life, he was young, and he asked God for wisdom to show him how to lead his people. And because he didn't ask for riches, and he didn't ask for his enemies' head, he didn't ask for anything. He just wanted wisdom to be able to operate in the position that God had put him in. He wanted to be able to please God. But in Solomon's life, he started to kind of veer away from God. He started to have all these concubines, all these wives. He was doing pretty much what was in his heart. His wisdom did not diminish. As a matter of fact, people came from all over to hear the wisdom of Solomon. And so, one of the things that I realized, that as I was studying, he started to talk and use the word vanity a lot. Everything is just vanity. You do this, you do that, and in the end, it's all vanity. And the more and more I started to study about it, the more and more I started to realize that we work so hard to leave a financial legacy for our children. We will work 2 to 3 jobs to make sure that our children have, that our family have, that we don't lack anything financially. But one of the things I'm learning in my journey in life is that just as much, there's something just as important, if not, I believe, greater than just having a financial legacy, is being able to have a legacy where you leave a legacy of love, where you leave a legacy of a relationship with God, where you leave a legacy there's so many different areas that you can leave a legacy. And as I was working today, it just kept just replaying in my mind. So I want to kind of go over some of the things for those of you that may have heard about legacy. I just want to just break it down to the simplest forms in terms of what legacy really is, right? And the definition of legacy is, it's hold on, let me get my thing up, because I tell you, it's my computer's already acting up. um but legacy is when you actually leave something behind, that's going to benefit the person that you're leaving it to. In a nutshell, I'm just kind of summarizing what it says until I pull my until my screen unfreezes. But basically, is you being able to leave behind something of value, right, to the person that will be benefiting from whatever it is that you're giving. So that could be, you can be leaving behind wisdom, a legacy of wisdom. You can leave a legacy of finances. And you can also leave a legacy of some not so good things too. And so that's what kind of spearheaded this whole topic about what will be your legacy, because most of the time we're building our lives and we're doing things, and we're intentional when it comes to building our life in terms of what we want to manifest physically. But I just don't feel like we put enough energy into building a legacy that's going to be long lasting outside of the finances, that will help us in managing our finances, that will help us in managing our relationships, that will help us in managing our relationship with God, that will also help us in our life, whether we're single, whether we're, dating or not dating, how you live your life and the footprint that you leave here on earth is a lot of it has to do with your behavior and your intentions. That is more so leaving a legacy more than anything. How do I know? Why do we have generational curses, right? Why do we have generational curses and we have generational blessings, right? And I believe that some of the generational curses that our families experience, right, that we experience as a result of our family is because things that were it was becoming that generational curse has become some people's legacy, which means you pick up the same habits. That's what you've seen played out before you, and that's what you tend to pass on to your children. Everything that you see with your natural eye, things that have been taught intentionally or involuntarily, has become a legacy, meaning that you've been applying that in your life unwillingly or willingly, right? And so as I started to think about this, I was looking at in Ecclesiastics, while I'm waiting for my computer to come up, but in Ecclesiastics chapter 2, right? Um, and 21, it says, "For there is a man whose labor is in wisdom and in knowledge and equity. Yet to a man that has not labored therein shall he leave it for his portion. This is also vanity and great evil. For what hath man of all his labor and of the vexation of his heart, wherein he has labored under the sun? For all his days are sorrows, and his travail grief. Yea, his heart taketh not rest in the night. This is also vanity. There's nothing better for a man that he should eat and drink, and that he should make his soul enjoy in his labor. And also I saw that it was from the hand of God. For who can eat, or who else can hasten hereunto more than I? For God gives to a man that is good in his sight wisdom, knowledge, and joy, but to the sinner he giveth travail, to gather and to heap up, that he may give to him that is good before God. This also is vanity and vexation of spirit. So here Solomon is saying, you can have people who have built up all this wealth. You can build up financial wealth. You could build up wisdom, and because I often talk about it. There's two different types of wisdom. Well, actually, there's more than two different types of wisdom. You have the wisdom of man, the wisdom of the world, and you have the wisdom of the age, right? And then you have the wisdom of God. So Solomon, after living his life in being able to pretty much have whatever was in his heart, there was nothing that he didn't refuse himself. If he wanted more concubines, he was able to have as many women as he wanted. There was nothing that even Solomon himself said that he did not give himself, right? Everything that he desired, he did. He allowed himself to have, but he realized that in having everything that his heart desired, that he still realized that even in his desire to have everything that he realized at the end of the day, it all meant nothing. It didn't keep you from having all the things that you desire in your heart. Doesn't keep you from it doesn't make you go to have a peaceful night rest, a peaceful night of rest. It doesn't make you have peace inside your heart. It doesn't mean that you'll have everything go exactly the way you want it to, that it's going to bring some level of peace. It's not. At the end of the day, Solomon, and then he eventually says at the end of the day, he realized that it's best to fear God, depart from evil. This is the whole duty of man. Solomon began to realize throughout his life that even at all the things that he was good at, all the things that he was able to obtain, that he realized at the end of the day, it really didn't mean anything. It didn't mean nothing. It didn't mean anything. And he had everything. He had everything that probably the people around him and probably some of us would have been like, man, I would have loved to have. He had everything, right? And he realized it was still vanity, because though you can work and you can have all this stuff, when you die, guess what? whether it's your children or your family or somebody you designated to have what you want, at the end of the day, trust and believe somebody's going to benefit off of your hard work, right? So he realized that it is a gift of God to be able to enjoy, right? Whatever it is that God gave you, because at the end of the day, you know, it's not, at the end of the day, it's not the things. The Bible says that life does not consist in the abundance of things, right? So if we think by any chance that our legacy of only financial wisdom is going to be the only thing that we need in order to bring in order to be able to make sure that our children, our family, and people that we're impacting, that their lives are going to change, we're sadly mistaken. That's just one part of it, right? It's important for us to look at our lives and see what exactly. I've been intentional about this even as a young teenage mom. I was a teenage mom at 17 years old. And even at 17, I started to be intentional about what I wanted to impart into my children. I was very intentional, right? And even though I was young and I was still learning wisdom and I was still learning how to do things, I was very intentional about taking charge in certain areas of their lives. Even as I started to know, as I started to grow in my early years of walking with the Lord, I was very intentional about making sure that I reared my children a certain way. And I often got criticized for it. People used to say to me, I thought I was better than, I thought my kids was better than theirs. And they used to always say, just say all kinds of hurtful things, right? And that wasn't even my intention. It was just that at a very early age, I realized that everything that I do was going to impact my children's life, because everything that my parents did before me was already impacting my life at even as a teenager. And so I started to make be very intentional about teaching them things about life principles, teaching them about how to prioritize what is important first. Doesn't mean that I was perfect, doesn't mean that I did everything right, but I was very intentional about making sure that I instilled it in them, even though I was still learning some things myself. And I realized even sometimes when I didn't allow my children to be a part of different. They wasn't allowed to spend a night at people's houses. They wasn't allowed to be a part of different activities and groups, even though it was among believers. Right? It was because I knew at a very early age that they were going to. I was raising children that were one. These were people, and if I was going to mentor or be able to impart wisdom into anybody, I was going to make sure that my children were going to be the very first benefactor of that. And when I begin to do that in the world, especially in the family or when you're around people who pretty much let their children do whatever, I was looked at as I was trying to be better than, or I was trying to prove myself to. And the only thing that I was trying to do was change the trajectory of the direction of my children's life, because I knew what I experienced. I knew what got me there, and I knew that it was going to take a different mindset in order to go further, especially when I started being exposed to different things. When you start to get exposed to different things, and it starts to change how it changes how you view life, it changes your perspective. And so I was very intentional about making sure that I went the extra mile to live in different areas, right? Even though I grew up in the hood, I was intentional, even if I had to pay more for it, because I wanted to leave a legacy of making sure that my children, that they don't get stuck in the mindset of settling wherever they are, that they always have that desire to do better, to be better, to position themselves to be better. And I want that was one of the part of the legacies that I was wanting to lead to them. So me and their dad was very instrumental in making sure that we lived in certain areas, and we didn't care how much it was going to cost us. We wanted to expose them to something different so that they can be able to have a chance at being able to do better than what we did or what we grew up as. And so when I did that, I'm kind of glad that I did, because it created a desire. When I look at my children's life now, hello, hello, how are you? Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much. Um, and so what I started to realize is, when I look at my kids' life now, and I look at even how they make their choices, even how they even think, sometimes I just smile inside, and I'm grateful to God that I have done my part, right, in their younger, impressionable years, to make sure that I position them around people and position them in different places, just so that they can have the exposure. Because I knew having exposure to different environments meant that I get to change the direction and even open myself up to other things outside of my natural environment, right? My everyday environment, which means that if I lived in an environment where everybody was content where they are and that nobody really desired more, I was exposed to around people who were showing me what it's like if you just put a little bit more effort into what you're already doing. If you begin to connect yourself around different crowds of people, that it will cause you to dream. It will cause you to feel like it can cause you to feel like that you can have more for you and your family. And so one of the things that I was strategic about is making sure that they were exposed, right? And then one of the second things I was always intentional about is making sure that I took moments and made them teachable. And I want to make this clear. Even making those teachable moments didn't mean that I was perfect in everything that I was doing. I was striving, and I continue to strive. I was striving to be that example. I was talking to my best friend, and we were having a conversation about prime. There's a reason why, and we're still talking about legacy. There's a reason why we are called as mothers and fathers, the primary parent, right? There's a reason why you're called the primary parent. You're called the primary parent because you are the first and should be the foremost, most important person that is speaking in their lives outside of God. So you should be shaping and fashioning them for whatever it is that God called them to be, right? So if you're not shaping and fashioning your children to be a certain way, then what happens is by default, they start to be shaped and fashioned by their environment, by the kids that they see in school, by their neighborhood, by anybody else besides you. And when I was younger, I used to always fight, right? To be the main voice in my children's life, not because I didn't feel like I wanted, and I never knew why at the time. I used to always wonder, like, why is it that I'm always like struggling to be the voice in their ear? Because I started to feel like everybody else was reaching and trying to overpower my voice in their ear. So everybody was trying to impart their will, their intention, their teachings, and whether it was unwillingly or willingly, everybody, it seemed like, wanted to have more of a voice in their lives more so than I did. So what I started to do is I started to take a back seat as an early parent, and I started to just say, "Oh, well, I don't really know anything," right? And then I would just kind of let everybody else really kind of rear them, and it would make me frustrated because I didn't understand why I was frustrated. I didn't understand why there was such an intense desire to be the primary voice in their life. And so we were talking, and I was saying how with me making a decision to homeschool my younger girls, and my decision to do so is so that I can be the primary, not the only, we're not going to be the only voice in our kids' life, but I wanted to make sure that I was the primary voice in their ear so that I can, during their impressionable years, be their number one influence, right? Because if I can influence them and I can take, I heard this coach say one time, and that thing just dug in me, and it kind of like imprinted me. And he said the first 4 years of a child's life, or the first 4, I think he said, or the first 6 years. I'm not sure exactly what it is. He said the first 6 years, I think. The first 6 years are the do as I say moment, right? That means they're too young to understand. You can't go into this is why you do this and this is why I told you to do that. Those are the years that you're telling them, do what I say. Go to your room, clean your room, go to bed, eat your food. You're not get your this is the you're teaching them how to hear your voice, how to listen to your voice, right? And then he said the second part of the teaching is to teach them why. Now, how many of y'all know we've had kids, all of our kids have gone through this stage where it's why? You can say something to them and they're like, why, mommy? Why? Go do this. But why? And as a young parent, I didn't understand that why was the second half of the teaching. Once you train them in those first 6 years, you're teaching them to respond to what you tell them to do so that they can get in the habit of practicing obedience, doing what you tell them to, whether they understand it or not, right? Then when they get to the second half of their life, you're teaching them why they had to do what you said to do. So now you're telling them the why behind why you told them to do. Well, some of us should, but some of our parents, it was do as I say and not as I do for the rest of our life. And there was no breakdown. You just did what I say, which is why you had kids. That's why we grow up finding out things on our own and learning the hard way, hitting our head, getting into all kind of stuff, because nobody was answering in the second half of our lives the why. Why should we be in? Why do we have to clean up our room? Why do we have to be in the house at a certain time? Why do we have to do this? But instead of some of our parents looking at it as an opportunity to teach us, right? They just said, do as I say. That's it. They didn't want to ask the questions because most of the time they were tired. They've been working. They was frustrated. They were overwhelmed. They had a lot of stuff going on. Some parents had boyfriends coming over and they just wanted you to just do what I say, go to bed, and that's it, right? What I started to do is, and so when I heard that, and he said the second stage of their life is the teaching them why you do. And then he said the third stage is teaching them not first, the first stage you taught them to obey. The second stage, you're teaching them why. The third stage, he talked about you're now teaching them how to respond to ability, which means you've done the teaching. You taught them how to cook, little things. You taught them how to clean their room. You taught them how to bathe. Now you're teaching them in that third stage how to respond with ability. That's what responsibility is. Respond with ability. So when I thought about it, and I thought, oh my God, this makes so much sense, which brings me back to my message about what is your legacy? And I think each of us as parents have gotten to a place where we have created an atmosphere to be able to leave a legacy, whether we knew we were leaving a legacy or not. Most of the time, we're only consciously aware of financial legacy, but you're leaving a legacy of, if you live in a life and you are living a life that is constantly going against the will of God for your life, you are leaving a legacy of disobedience. And I talked about last week about how disobedience could it be the reason why you're dealing with anxiety and depression. And it wasn't necessarily to address people who have real legitimate chemical imbalances and issues. There's so many things that causes depression, anxiety, and fear. My focus was to focus on the believers that God has specifically given them an assignment to do, and they refuse, whether by delaying or disobeying, right? Whatever it is that God has called them to do. So you're leaving a legacy of disobedience. When you are willingly disobeying what God has instructed us to do in his word, you are leaving a legacy of disobedience. When you are married and you and your husband are together, then those legacies can sometimes turn into generational curses, right? And so, which means if you have a history of constant disobedience in a particular area in your family bloodline, then the legacy that's being left in that family bloodline is disobedience. Or it could be health issues. It could be anything, right? But the point of the contact that I want you to really focus on is that what are you? Look at your life and begin to, the way I look at mine, because I sure did take a look at mine. So I'm not talking at you. This is an observation of what I've seen in my own life. And I just want to be able to encourage you to look at your life and see what kind of legacy are you leaving behind for your children, for your family, for the people that are around you. Because one thing I realize is that when we focus mainly on one area of legacy, then what happens is, and even Solomon said, you take you work hard, right? I saw somebody had put, a friend of mine had put on Instagram, and it was this man said that he spent, he, it was a story he was mentioning about some lady. She had a pension. She worked at her job for, like, she retired at 60, and she spent a lot of time retired, preparing her life for the last half of her life, and she died before she even had a chance to enjoy it. And so my point in making that and bringing that story up is that sometimes we are spending so much time trying to build a life, and you need to do those things. We need to make sure that our children are taken care of. You also want to make sure that you're doing, also that you're imparting wisdom, and that you're leaving a legacy of good decision making, that you're leaving a legacy of making sure that their character is intact, teaching them how to problem solve, because sometimes, especially in the kids in this generation, don't know how to go through anything, right? You have children that are under so much pressure, societal pressure, right? Peer pressure. There's so many different types of pressure that they have not learned, right? How they don't have a legacy of overcoming. So when you live a life and your children begin to see you go through things, and they begin to see you face different things, and they see how you get through it, you are leaving a legacy to show them how to get through hard times. When you actually overcome, you show them that it doesn't matter what happens. One of the things that I've shown my children is how to be resourceful. My children are the most resourceful kids that I ever know, right? They laugh at me because they tell me I can create and make all kinds of things out of stuff, but I laugh at them because I see that the same has happened for them, that they too have learned how to take things and be able to make it into nothing, make it into something, right? And so when I begin to watch them and I begin to see, they begin to watch me. And there were moments where I went through some really tough times, and it was some real life hardships, right? And I remember I was living in this apartment complex, and my children were young at the time, and I just gotten divorced from my first husband. And I was really just trying to adapt to this new life of trying to raise these kids on my own. And I really suffered because I was intentional. It was always that fight in the back of my head of, you got to provide for these kids, but one day it was just always that pressure in the back of me, like, these are still adults. These are still they're still going to grow up and be adults. And though you're going through stuff, it is still your job to parent them. It is still your job to leave a legacy of overcoming and teaching them how to go through obstacles, right? And so it's funny because I remember we used to watch Family Matters, and I remember on Family Matters that the father had bought the son a broke down car, right? And his job was, it became a project. So he had to learn how to build that car, and so that he can appreciate the car, instead of, because nowadays, we have cyber kids, so they don't know what it's like to build cars and put cars together. I remember, with a friend of mine, Larry, we would take cars, we would fix them up and try to figure out ways to be able to work things out. And it was something that our children began to watch and say, wait a minute, like, they started to watch me. And I remember there was a time, it was, my car had broke down, and I had just started my business. I was fresh out of school as a skincare specialist, and I was trying to start my business as an esthetician, and God had gave me an incredible idea way before email marketing is the way it is. And I'll show you some of the pictures, and you probably have already seen it because I posted on Facebook multiple times, but it was on my old Facebook account, so it's probably not there now. But I remember doing things like catching people's email and following up with email before catching up with email was even a thing, right? And so what I did was I would go into people's houses. I would go to these different events, these because I had to grow my business and I had to feed my family, right? So I would go to these events, these healthcare events as a skincare specialist, and I would go in there and I would capture their emails and phone numbers, and I would get enough leads. Sometimes I would walk out of there with like 100, 150 leads, sometimes more, and that was enough leads to carry me throughout the month, right? Because everything being a business owner was a numbers game. So I knew that if I had 150 to 200 leads from one healthcare event, and I did several of them in a month, I knew I had enough leads, and that's I was so confident that if I got at least 4 orders a day, right? And I was confident that those orders were going to go through. And I was like, if I get at least 4 orders a day, man, I'm going to be pretty well. I'm going to be pretty done, because I had skincare packages that I was creating my own natural products, my own bath and body products, my own skincare. And so I was confident that if I went to see this many people and scheduled these appointments and gave them free facials, that they would, I was sure that at least five out of, or at least 3 out of 5 of those appointments, they were going to buy something. And actually, all 5 of them, I never really went a day without anybody buying anything, because I was very strategic in making sure that the products that I didn't have any competition, right? So I went in the houses. I didn't have to worry about fighting with Victoria's Secret, Bath and Body Works. I didn't have to battle with that, because I was in their house and the only competition was me. So I got a chance to, with the facials, be able to give them skincare and let them feel my products, let them see what my products were like, and they always bought. Always. I can't tell you, there's very few appointments that I went on that entire time that I did they didn't buy anything. And that's how I started to support me and my children, because I was adamant about making sure that I was there to be able to provide that emotional support, because their dad and I had divorced. I wanted to provide that emotional support, that financial support, as I did when we were married. And I was a stickler about that. And when I started to do that, I had all kinds of things come up against me. But all I kept thinking about in my mind was, how are they going to view me in this? If I get to a place where the provisions start to dry up, or something was happening, because the provision was coming in, but then I would have something like car would break down, different thing, all kinds of stuff was happening. And I started to feel like, how are my kids going to look at me going through this trial and tribulation? How are they going to view me? How are they going to look at it? Are they going to look at me as a failure, or are they going to look at me? Are they going to be encouraged? How are they going to view me? And to me, that was really vital to me, because in my head, there was this constant need to make sure that I was rearing my kids in a way they should go, right? I was really adamant about that. So I was always concerned about what they were thinking. So there were times when we didn't have hot water, and I had to just, do them jump cold showers, and we didn't have a wash and dryer in the apartment, but I had a wash and dryer. So we would, a friend of mine, we would hook up the washer in the bathroom. And there were several times where sometimes the wash the little tube was, sometimes I would forget to take the tube and put it in the bathtub so that it can rinse the water. But instead, sometimes I would forget, and the water would flood, and it would damage my couch downstairs. And we used to have Bible studies downstairs with a group of people every week. And I used to be like, oh my God, this is going to be a disaster. And I was just like so overwhelmed. And all I kept thinking was, how are my kids going to view me? They're going to see me as a failure. They're going to see me as not being able to provide for them, because they were at an age at this time where they were like 13, they wasn't like 5 and 6 anymore. So I started to feel like, oh my God, what are they going to think about me? What are the people around me going to think about me? Are they going to am I going to be a bad mother? Are they going to look at me as, I'm incapable of taking care of my children? So all of these things began to go through my mind. But the one thing that kept sticking out to me is I wanted to make sure that I was teaching, that I was leaving a legacy of overcoming. And so we would have moments where we would sit down and we would have discussions about life and how different things was going on. And believe it or not, when I look back at those years, to me, and this is just to me, those were like the best years of my life. Because not only did I develop a closer walk with the Lord, but my children, I began to instill a healthy relationship in them. So they started to take some of the things. And it's funny because I talk to them now and they say to me, Mom, I learned this from you. I remember when we were going through this, and I remember how you showed us how to get through this. I remember how this happened and that happened. And I was feeling kind of like, wow, because they were able to, it was a legacy that I left, a legacy of overcoming, a legacy of faith. I gave, and so when I was sitting at my desk and I was thinking about this topic, and I was thinking of the title and all the things that surrounded one of the things I kept thinking about is the legacies that I was leaving for my kids, and the legacy that I seen operating in their life that they begin to take up really kind of encouraged me and made me feel like it was all worth it. And though I had been, people literally, said all kinds of negative things about me and told me that I thought I was better, I thought my kids was better than anybody, had nothing to do with that. I was just very strategic because I knew the direction I wanted to go as a parent. So here in Ecclesiastics, in chapter 2, here Solomon is saying it's all vanity. You work and you create all of these assets. You create all these things. You fulfill everything. He fulfilled everything in his heart desire. He realized at the end of the day, he still called it vanity. Now, if a man who has everything, and God specifically told him that he was going to give him everything, can tell you that he's had it all and it's still vanity, that's something to pay attention to. So as I was looking at it, and I started to realize that it doesn't mean that because we feel that it's all vanity that we shouldn't seek to desire those things. It just means that while you're building your empire, while you're building your wealth, while you're building legacy, right? Financially, make sure that you are leaving what I consider to be lasting legacy, right? Because when you leave a lasting legacy, right, it makes a difference because these are things that's going to carry on with them when the money's not there and when the money is there. I've seen my children take the legacy of being able to take any situation and create a positive way out of it. I've seen them practice that in their own lives, and it made me it made me feel like, man, if anything was to ever happen, my kids would be okay because they learned how to. They've taken the skill, the legacy of faith and the legacy of overcoming, and they've used that in their own personal lives. And I've seen it. I've seen my son do some stuff, and I literally said to myself, there isn't, how in the world was he able to do that? And then I realized, wow. And he said, Mom, I realized this, and he told me, what he needed to do. And I was just so proud because I realized that it don't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what it is. If I leave a legacy, right, of faith, of a relationship with God, that means no matter what they go through in life, no matter what they face, they're going to be able to look at me as their mother and say, if it's anything, when I want to give up, when I feel discouraged, when I feel like there's no hope, I can look at my mother's life and her example and say, if she did it and God was there for her, then God's going to, and that continues to be my testimony even to this day. My testimony and my legacy for my children still has not changed. My legacy is I want to leave and continue to leave a legacy of overcoming and a legacy of faith, because I know that in this world you're going to have tribulation. There are going to be some things that happen. I don't care how much you prepare for them. I don't care. You can have people who have all the money in the world and still lose their mind, right? And you can have people who have everything their heart desire and still are not happy, right? And so I want to be able to leave a legacy that my kids, no matter if they become wealthy or not, that they can look at their life and develop a level, an attitude of gratitude, right? And know that no matter what they go through, that God is going to make a way. And it's funny because as I talk to them and in their different circumstances and situations, they'll tell you themselves. They will tell you. They call me because they say, "Mom, we know you believe God for anything." That is a legacy of faith. They have seen me go through heartbreak. They've seen me go through death of a loved one, of my husband. They've seen me overcome financial hardship. They've seen me in areas where it didn't look favorable, but the reason why I am the person that I am today, and why I feel that no matter what goes on in my life, that I am still able to remain the same, is because at the end of the day, I realize that life does not consist in the abundance of things. That the kingdom of God is not in meat and drink, but it's in righteousness, it's in joy, it's in peace, it's in joy in the Holy Spirit. If you have righteousness, if you have joy and peace in God, then it doesn't matter if you will learn how to abase and you will learn how to abound. I like what Myron Golden said. He said, though it's nice to have a lot of things, right? I know how to fish if I need to. I know how to there are some basic skills of living, of life, that I have accumulated. So if I lost everything, I know how to survive. And I think that's what's kind of missing in this generation, because everything is so fast paced. Everything is, you don't require any thinking or any work involved. Everything just comes to you the way you want it, when you want it, how you want it, right? That I think that it kind of, that for our kids, they've lost a sense of the why in between the teaching growing up. They lost they don't have the ability to respond to ability. They can't respond to ability because they are, my mother used to tell us, clean your room. That's it. Clean your room, right? And so my mother was a neat freak. My mother was a type, it would drive her crazy if her house was not neat. And so it was like, clean your room. And if you don't do it, doggone it, I'm going to do it, because I can't sit around with my house a mess, right? But what it did was I started to see the effect of um, how my mother was just very adamant about some things. And though I went through my little stages and I had to grow in some areas, and I'm grateful to God for those areas that He allowed me to grow in, I started to realize that the legacy that my mother left me, or that she's leaving me even now, and she's still living, is the legacy. My mother has a legacy of love. My mother's level of love is so, sometimes I just can't even understand it, because I'm looking at her like, what? They don't deserve. And my mother will love people in their worst state, whether they treat her right or I'm like, what in the world? I would have been cut them off. But her legacy of love is what she's passed down to me. And so I'm able to love people in unconditionally, sometimes to a detriment. And the Lord has to, allow, has had to reshape my mindset when it comes to loving people, because I realize that sometimes when you don't have boundaries set up, that you will have people that will use or access your level of love, and they will use it against you, right? And they will use it to their advantage, right? And so one of the things I've had to learn how to do is to step back and create more boundaries so that I can make sure that the love I give out is reciprocated as much as possible. Now, if I'm giving you charitable love, that's charitable love. But let me tell you something, I'm not giving you no charitable love in no relationship. No. In a relationship, I expect reciprocated love. I don't want to do charitable love in a relationship, right? So I charitable love in every other area, but I'm not going through years and years in a relationship and not getting anything reciprocated. That just isn't going to happen. Anyway, back to what I'm talking about. So again, my computer is up. The definition of legacy means giving something that will be valued and treasured by those who survive after your death. It's giving something that will be valued and treasured by those who survive after your death. It requires thought to ensure that any items that have meaning to you will also have meaning to those you designate to inherit them. There's a story where there was a lady, she was selling her house, she had passed away, and they were selling her assets, and many of you probably heard the story. They were selling her assets, and they began to say that, and so one of the biggest things that mattered to her was her son. So what she did was they auctioned off everything in the house, and she said specifically in her will that whoever purchases the frame of her son, the picture of her son, that they will inherit everything that is hers, everything in the house, everything that belonged to her. Because if they valued or saw value in what she valued, she would be willing to give them everything, leave them all of her inheritance. So everybody else were buying different things, but this one particular person bought the picture of her son and went home, didn't think anything about it. They thought it was a cute picture, went home, opened up the back of the frame and realized there was a will. And in the will that was in the back of the frame said, whoever purchased this picture of my son will inherit everything that I own. That person became very wealthy because they valued, right, or they valued something that meant something to somebody else. And when it comes to leaving a legacy for your children, don't just put aside physical items that could, because he says he said don't just lay your treasures on earth, but also have treasures in heaven, right? Because what happens is if all your treasures, if everything that you own, if the legacy you have is limited to just what you have physically, then you have left your children nothing. It's just as bad as not leaving them, because what good is it to leave them all of this wealth and you have not left them wisdom in how to maintain it? What good is it to leave them all this wealth when the wealth that they can later on get access to could destroy them and kill them prematurely, right? Or they can be in a position to give it to somebody, or somebody else take advantage of them and take everything from them, right? So make sure that your legacy is not just something physical, but make sure that the legacy that you're leaving, that it's something that it has meaning to those that are designated to inherit. Now, the lasting legacy is a positive impact. It is the positive impact your life has on other people, whether it's your friends, your colleagues, or even strangers. Your legacy is the sum of the personal values, accomplishments, and actions that resonate with the people around you. So we get to see, when you go to a person's homegoing, you get to see and to hear the legacy that that person has left in their obituary through the people that are coming up and talking about their life. My Sisterhood Check-in videos is my legacy to my children, where they can always have access to the wisdom that I have for them and all of the people that are surround me, which is why it's funny, because when my husband died, I want to say maybe a month or so before he passed away, he started doing all these videos. And I used to be like, and I had an office then at the time, and he used to come to my office and he used to go in one of the rooms and he would just record these videos. And I would just, and he was so adamant about these videos. And I used to say to myself, like, why is he do at that time? People weren't even really doing videos like that. And Facebook Live was still there, but it wasn't as popular as it is now. So I didn't understand why there was this big deal to do these videos. Now that he's no longer with us, I get to go back and look at those videos and I get to share his legacy with his children. I get to share with my girls because they were young when he passed. I get to share with him the legacy that he left behind. They get to hear from his mouth the legacy that he wanted to leave behind. So your legacy is the sum of your personal values, your accomplishments, and actions that resonate with people around you. Now, in Ecclesiastes 2, it says that God gives us a legacy of wisdom, knowledge, and joy, right? God gives us a legacy of wisdom, knowledge, and joy. And of course, he gives us a legacy of salvation, right? It says, but for the sinner, he gives the work, he gives them the work of gathering and collecting so that it's transferred to the people of God. So that means when you don't have a relationship with God and you're not pursuing the will of God for your life, that means everything that you work hard for at the end of the day, it's gonna go to somebody else. You're gonna spend all those years building an empire, and it's gonna wind up, you're gonna die, and it's gonna go to somebody else. But he said for the believer, he gives us a legacy of wisdom, knowledge, and joy. And one of the things I wanted to talk about one of the first people to give legacy was Moses, right? Moses said in Deuteronomy chapter 6, right? God begins to give Moses a legacy, or what would be a legacy throughout all generations, right? And he tells them when he gives him the 10 commandments on the mountain, right? And when he gives them the 10 commandments, Moses comes back down and he starts to give them what God has instructed him to give them, which was the 10 commandments, right? But then he also says, now these are the commandments, the statutes, and the judgment which the Lord your God commanded to teach you, meaning that God had given Moses his statutes, his commandment, and his laws to teach the children of Israel, right? He said that you might fear the Lord, right? Keep his statutes, his commandments, which he command you. And this is where it became a legacy. He said, which he commands you, your sons, and your sons' sons. So the wisdom that God gives you through relationship with him and through your experiences, the wisdom that you learn is not just for you, it's for your children and your children's children, which means your wisdom should surpass just your children. Your children, there's another story where and many of you probably heard it, where this one lady, she was in the kitchen and she was cooking, right? And she was cutting the sides of the ham, and then she was putting it into the pan and she was cooking it. So one of the daughter began to ask the mom, why do you cut the two ends of the ham before you put it in the pot? And she says, oh, because my mother did. And so she asked her grandmother, she said, Grandma, why do you cut the two ends of the ham? And the grandmother said, well, because my mother did it. And so she went to her great grandmother, said, great grandma, why does grandma and mom cut the two ends off the ham when they cook it? And she said, baby, because I didn't have a big enough pot. So she cut the ends, right, off the ends off so that the ham could be in the pot. So her daughter seen that it became a legacy. It began something she carried on. Then when she had her children, she saw her mother do it and she continued, not understanding why, right? Not understanding why, just carrying on. So you are leaving a legacy, whether you know it intentionally or not. You are leaving a legacy. So here Moses is telling the children of Israel, here therefore, Israel, observe to do, right? keep his statutes, his commandments that he command you, your son, and your son's sons, all the days of your life, so that your days will be prolonged. So he was giving them a legacy of obedience and obeying the word of God, so that their life can be prolonged, right? And he said, "Hear, O Israel, and observe to do it, that it may be well with you, and that you may increase mightily, as the Lord God of thy fathers has promised thee, in the land that floweth with milk and honey." And I've talked about this before, and I was saying how we spend so much time talking about going after our goals and our dreams, and those things have its place. But he told us to seek first the kingdom of God and his way of doing things. And then he said, and this is confirmation, that all those things will be added to us. And here it says in Deuteronomy, this was even in the Old Testament, he said the same thing, that it may go well with you and that you may increase. So following the Lord's statutes, following his laws and statutes, provision and wealth is the natural byproduct of following God, right? If we are not where we need to be, in a place where we're comfortable, then we're either there for two things: as a lesson, right, or preparation, right? So if you are not where you need to be, then you need to look at either you need to look at it as either preparation, or is that God is trying to teach you. Because according to here, he says if you adhere to his word, right, he said he's going to make sure that you increase, not just increase a little bit, but you're going to increase mightily. So you don't have to worry about setting up a legacy of wealth, because your legacy of obedience is going to lead to a legacy of wealth. He said, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might." Your legacy, your children should be able to look at your life and see a legacy of Christ, a legacy of faith. They should be able to be able to look at your life and say, "My mom lived a life of faith. She wasn't perfect, but she lived a life of faith. She trusted, when things didn't go well, because everything in life is not going to go well. It's not going to go the way we want it to all the time, right? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that when you understand this concept of being able to obey the voice of God, it's going to go well with you. And he's not only going to increase you, but it says he's going to increase you mightily. So you don't have to worry about trying to leave and focus all your attention on trying to get wealth, because that is a byproduct of your obedience. Then he says, "And these words which I command in these days, that they shall be in your heart," right? "And that you should teach them diligently," intentional, meaning that you ought to be intentional with teaching your children the ways of God. He said, "Teach them diligently into your children, and you shall talk of them when you sitteth in the house, and when you walketh by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou riseth up." What legacy are you leaving your children? I remember back some years ago, before we moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and we would have Bible studies in our home. My children know every Sunday evening we would go to church, come home, and we would have Bible study with 20, 40 people at our house, right? Just teaching and doing what it says, and talking with them when we sit it in the house and walking about it. That means we were talking about it. We were walking, using moments of discouragement as teachable moments, using situations and circumstances in their life as teachable moments, right? And he said, "Thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thy hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And thou upon the post of thy house and on thy gates. And it shall be, when the Lord thy God shall have brought thee into the land which he sware unto thy fathers, and to Abraham, and to Isaac, and Jacob, to give thee great and goodly cities, which thou buildest not, and houses full of all good things, which thou fillest not." Mean you didn't do it, he did it. "And diggeth, and wells digged, which you ain't dig, and vineyards and olive trees, which you didn't plant." But the only thing he says, when you eaten and you are full, when you've gotten everything that you've asked for, when you've worked hard and you've done all the things, and God has given you the ability to enjoy the works of your hand, What is the legacy that you're leaving behind? When I think about even the relationships that I've been in over the past couple of years, and I think about the different heartaches that I went through, and I remember crying, saying, Lord, why didn't this work out? What happened with this relationship? Why didn't this relationship work? What happened? And I started to realize that God didn't allow in those days, in those situations, for those relationships to work, because he was protecting my legacy, right? There were some things he knew that I needed to have those two little girls. And they have a destiny of their own. And it was funny because I had went to a sister keeper conference back in like 2000, and I was pregnant with my son, and I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, I had went with our church, and we were in Tallahassee, Florida, and I remember us like freaking out because I was starting to miscarry. And they asked me, do you want to be prayed for before you go to the hospital? And I'm like, yes, pray for me. So they bring me up to the altar, and they're praying for me and praying that I don't give birth before my time. And all I could see is Yvonne K. Park's mom coming. She's clapping her hand like this, and she, in the name of Jesus. And the crowd moves out the way, and I see her as the crowd begins to open up, and she come in the name of Jesus, you will not give birth before your time. And she begins to lay hands on me and pray for me, right? But then this is the funny part, y'all, right? So then as she prayed, now God says the enemy is after your womb. And she said, and because of that, he tried to take this one. Now he's going to give you two more. And at that time, I was like, out the spirit, that time, I was like, two more. And this was in 2001. So I'm thinking, oh, no, I ain't having two more kids. That is crazy. Oh, no. And she was like, it's going to happen, whether you agree with it or not. It is so. It's God has said it's gonna be so. And I'm like, ooh, I don't know. I'm gonna have to talk to God about this one, because I don't know about this one. I was struggling to have the one that I had. And I was like, oh no, my husband at the time, we were going through stuff, and I was like, oh, I ain't having no more kids. Oh no, uh-uh. And then it wasn't till recently I was sitting down, I was talking to Tasha, and we were having a conversation, and I said, oh my God, the prophecy that was spoken over me that I will have two more children. The two children that I'm looking at that I have now are the two children that God was referencing. So I realized that all those relationships or situationships, because not all of them was really relationships, but when I think about all those interactions with people that I was connecting with, that God was protecting my legacy. And though it looked like my heart was crushing as a result of these relationships that were ending, or situationships that were ending at the time, I was crushed because I was feeling like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? I was internalizing rejection, and I was thinking, what is going on with me? Why is the relationships not working? What's happening? What's wrong with me? Picking me apart. What is it about me? What am I not doing with it? And it had nothing to do with me being something wrong. It was simply God protecting the legacy that he had for me. So now when I look at relationships and I look at things when not working, it doesn't mean that I don't still feel the hurt from the disconnection. It doesn't mean that I don't still deal with the feelings of rejection. But what I realize, and I've had enough experience to understand, when I look at my prior situations, that if it doesn't work out, then 9 times out of 10, that rejection is sometimes redirection, because God is protecting his legacy that he put inside of you. God may not allow you to have that relationship because he's protecting the legacy that's on the inside of you, right? He might be protecting. May be something that he may want to birth out of you, that person may be incapable of assisting you in that journey, or he might have something completely different for them, which means you could possibly be interfering with their legacy, right? And so it's sometimes it's not, and it may not be he could be protecting their legacy, right? And so when I started to think about that, and I said, wow, this really is instrumental in helping dealing with disappointment, dealing with rejection, dealing with heartbreak, is that sometimes rejection is just simply redirection, because he knows that in and of your own strength, you won't have the ability to walk away from some people when he tells you to. Because if you're like me, my heart connects. The heart sometimes just want what it wants, right? Sometimes the heart just wants what it wants. And when you don't have the strength to disconnect from something that could affect your legacy, right? Then God has to come in and use rejection as a way to redirect you in the area that he wants you to be in, because there's something that he wants to get out of you, that he wants to impact other people with, that if you may have connected with that place, people, or thing, it could affect your legacy. It could affect, if I would have attempted in a relationship back then, right? That I had some relationships where I was just like, oh my God, I'm so in love, right? Had I had, I could have changed the whole direction of my legacy. That means I could have canceled out their legacy, right? And so when I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, Lord, help me in those times when things don't go the way I plan. I'm learning that everything at the forefront of my mind, I have to think legacy. What am I leaving as behind for my children? What is it that God has imparted on the inside of me that I need to put in the earth realm before I exit out of here? And if you connect with the wrong people, they can interfere with whatever it is that God has put on the inside of you. It can deter. And anytime you delay an area that you're supposed to be at, or a place you're supposed to be at, it's just as delayed obedience is still disobedience. So when I started to think about that, and I started to think about the legacy that I was leaving for my kids, and the people that I was impacting, it started to change how I deal with rejection. It started to change. Now I'm not internalize it. When a relationship doesn't go the way I want to, then I just simply say, okay, God is protecting my legacy. He's protecting. It didn't work out because he's protecting my legacy. There might be, sometimes you might connect with somebody, and you got somebody who's constantly pulling from you and constantly taking, and they're never imparting, and they're constantly taking. It's almost like eventually when God does get you to a place and you become extremely wealthy, and that person is constantly taking, God said, I got to move them out the way, because they will drain you of your resources, and you will be depleted emotionally, physically, financially, because that person is constantly taking from you and not reciprocating. So now I realize through life that my legacy that I'm leaving behind for my children is I'm learning to teach them the legacy of wisdom. I'm teaching them the legacy of relationships, how to deal with relationships, because even though I had one marriage that didn't go well in the end, I still had a marriage afterward that I fulfilled until the day my husband transitioned to be with the Lord. So my legacy of love and relationship is I can be there to show them what real love looks like, right? I help them to identify what is a healthy love, what's not a healthy love, right? And not to get caught up into the way the world perceives love, because nowadays when you're dating people and you're meeting people, you have to ask people, what is your interpretation of love? What is your interpretation of love, and how do you give love, and how do you receive love, and how do you, because if you don't, because I realize that people nowadays, their interpretation of love is sex. Some people's interpretation of love is, as long as you do for me, I'm doing for you. As long as you do for me and meet my needs, that's, I'm gonna love you until you change. So you have to find out what people's interpretation of love is, so that legacy of godly love, because if you don't teach them, we live in an age where we're redefining marriage, we're redefining faith even. We don't know how to go before the Lord and wait on the Lord anymore, because we live in a society where everything is fast. Give it to me now or else. So now it's interfere with our ability to be able to wait on God, right? Because now we're used to getting things when we want, how we want it, move it fast, fast pace, that now we've redefined what faith looks like. So now we're not living by faith, as the Bible says, the just shall live by faith. Now we like, oh, if it ain't happening now, oh, we are discouraged. We are like, our heads are hung down, because we are redefining faith, meaning that if we have to wait, and God put us in a position where we have to be patient, because the Bible tells us to let patience have its perfect work. Well, the only way patience is going to have its perfect work is if you allow it, through different circumstances that you go through, to do just that. But what happens is that we don't have the ability to wait, right? We don't have the ability to wait. So what we do is we get frustrated, right? We get frustrated and we be like, oh, you know, he was still and so it doesn't matter the technical difficulty or the things that I'm going through. He still allows me to make impact regardless of what I face and regardless of what I have to go through. So we're going to take a quick break, and I'm going to grab me a drink of water, and we'll be right back after this.
Help me to trust him again with my heart and not be scared, looking over my shoulder when it comes to his actions because I felt betrayed by him. Help me to trust his good intentions towards me.
May not be physically with you,
They're in your church.
but I am sitting next to you.
Different face.
Different name. Same story, though, that goes like this.
I've done some terrible things in my life,
Some of them I chose to do,
and I own these choices.
but others, I just feel like I was swept up in a series of circumstances that didn't involve my will.
They just sort of happened to me.
I've become the culmination of those choices and circumstances.
So I guess I just need to say it.
I really,
Really.
really need some help.
Hi, I'm Nadira, author, life and business coach, and founder of the Sisterhood Checkin podcast. I help women take their life experiences and turn them into life lessons. Book a call with me at bit.ly/coaching with Nadira. I look forward to helping you get to the other side of victory. Have a wonderful day. You know, there's seasons in that our gifts operate and flow in. There's seasons. And if you miss your season or your moment, your gift may not be no longer useful. Because if he called a generation to ask a question or to need something in a specific season, and he birthed you for that season, you're useless if you don't operate in your season.
Listen, Nadira, listen. Yeah, you're doing it again. You're doing it again. Now you do it.
Thank you. Welcome back to Sisterhood Check-In. I know I had a little bit of technical difficulties, but thank you for those that did decide to come back and join me again, both on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. But I want to go ahead and continue. We're talking about today's topic about what will be your legacy. And we were talking about Solomon in Ecclesiastics, where he was talking about how all of it is vanity. Everything we prepare for to leave behind to our children, at the end of the day, is all vanity. And the reason why I believe why he said it's all vanity, because at the end of the day, he said at the end of the chapter of Ecclesiastics, he said that he's determined that the conclusion of the matter is to fear God, obey his commandments, period. That's it. And that's the duty of man, is to fear God and obey his commandments. Why? Why is that the whole duty of man? Because at the end of the day, look, when you talk about somebody who has created something, right? They already know, right, exactly what their plan is for you. So look, either way, you're going to submit to it or you're going to be forced to submit to it. So it's better to just go ahead and submit to it, right? So we were talking about earlier about the importance of leaving a legacy, right? What will be your legacy? And for those of you, I know Mother's Day is coming up. For those of you that are dealing with the grief or the loss of a loved one, I have a devotional. It's called a Grieving Families Journal and Devotional. They actually, this kind of helps you, walks you through the grieving process of your loved one. It's very instrumental. It's journaling is one of the ways that helped me in me dealing with um, my grief when I lost my husband and when I lost my aunt. It was really difficult for me. And sometimes you don't know that when you grieve, you don't know exactly, you think you're gonna grieve one way, and then you realize that you turn out and you don't, and you grieve in ways that you don't even recognize your own self, right? So this devotional and journal kind of helps you day by day to kind of help you with being able to process the loss of your loved one, whether it's your mother. I know Mother's Day is coming up, and a lot of you have lost your mothers, have lost a loved one, and this time of the year is really difficult for you. And so I had you in mind when I created this devotional and this handbook. And I basically take you through some processing on how, take you through the grieving process and show you, because sometimes I realize that when people are grieving the loss of a loved one, being a person of many words doesn't always help. Being a person that does a lot of talking, thinking that you're helping, sometimes make the situation even more frustrating, even worse. So I have learned that people grieve in different ways. And so this journal, this devotional and journal, is an opportunity for you to be able to grieve the loss of your mom, your loved one, spouse, and be able to grieve in a way that's going to help you. And so not only is it a devotional to kind of help you walk through it, it's also a journal, so you can journal your thoughts and your feelings on each of the days that there's a devotion. So if you want to get this book, it's you can get it on my website. You can go to my website, www.coachingwithnadira.com. And when you go on coachingwithnadira.com, you'll be able to see it there. I'm going to go ahead and put the link down at the bottom for those of you that are interested. You can go to the website at the bottom, coachingwithnadira.com, and purchase it. I think it'll be a blessing to either you or somebody that that has a family of that's grieving over the loss of their loved one. And the reason why it's called a Grieving Families Journal is because sometimes when we are trying to be there for somebody who lost their loved one, what happens is sometimes we get really, our heart is right. We want to be there as their support. We want to make sure that we show up and that we let them know that we're there for them. But sometimes the best thing you can do is give them an opportunity to journal their thoughts, but not just journal their thoughts, but give them an opportunity to give them but they can have a devotional, right? Where they can actually be encouraged during that each day that they're actually grieving the loss of their loved ones. So make sure you go to my website, www.coachingwithnadira.com, and just click on the shops, and you'll be able to see all of my books and resources that I have available for you. So before we actually wrap up Sisterhood Check-in, I wanted to just re-emphasize that the importance of leaving, again, a legacy for your family, right? And the legacy has got to be more than just finances. There's nothing wrong with leaving a legacy of finances. There's nothing wrong with making sure that your family is taken care of financially, because we understand the things that go on in this world. We need finances, to be able to operate in this life. But the reality is that while you're actually grieving, while you're actually preparing for your finances, I want you to understand how important it is to make sure that you are also leaving a legacy of faith, right? That you are teaching your children, because of the times that we are living in, and the times that we're going to be faced with. We're going to be dealing with so many things. Your children is going to need more than just money to be able to over. Hold on, let me mute this one on my Instagram. I'm gonna mute this. So, so yeah, I just want to make sure that we understand that our children at this day and time, you have people who, especially nowadays, we're internet people are becoming internet millionaires by the seconds, right? So money is not an issue as much as it was before. And meaning that the ability to create wealth is a lot easier now because of the internet. So though we do need the financial aspect of it, we do need to leave a legacy for our children because of the responsibilities, and things are not becoming cheaper. I can tell you that right now. Things are getting way more expensive. But make sure that while you're leaving a financial legacy, that you are also leaving a legacy of wisdom, a legacy of knowledge, and a legacy of faith and joy, right? Because if you don't leave a legacy of faith, if you don't impart, if you don't train your children in a way that they should go, then what's going to happen is they're going to be overwhelmed with the cares of life, of this world, and they're not going to be able to deal with anything when it comes their way. They're going to be overtaken by everything that happens to them. So I want you to and I want to emphasize over and over again, just like Solomon said, hear the whole conclusion of the matter is to fear God, depart from evil, right? That's the whole duty of man. So while you're rearing your children, while you're building your homes and you're building your businesses and you're building your lives, make sure that you are building a legacy of faith, a legacy of joy alongside of building your wealth, which is why it's so important to have both mother and father in the homes, because I believe that the contribution and the legacy that you create for the next generation is even more impactful, right? So, not saying that you have that there, that, if you don't have a husband in the house, that there's something wrong with that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that it's even more impactful when you can have a husband, when you have both parents in the house and you're both rearing the children. You both can leave a legacy of faith, a legacy of discipline, a legacy of finances, a legacy of faith, a legacy of an overcomer, right? Think about when you're going about your day and you're planning your life, think about what kind of legacy are you leaving for your children. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate, again, make sure you go to this is a legacy that I'm leaving. My books and resources are a legacy for my children also, and for the people that benefit from them. So if you are someone are dealing with the loss of a loved one, make sure that you go to my website, www.coachingwithnadira.com. My daughter has also written a journal about forgiveness. Many of you have supported her. Thank you so much for supporting her in her journey as an actress in California, where she's been actually, she wrote a journal on forgiveness. So make sure you support Lay Preach. Go to laypreachroman.com and support her also in purchasing everything concerning, that is her legacy that she's leaving for her family, for her future. So make sure you go to www.coachingwithnadira.com and make sure you go to Lay Preach's website, laypreachroman.com, so that you can see all the different things that she has been producing as a result of what God is showing her in the area of forgiveness. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you are blessed, and I'll see you next week. And remember, just like I said, just like hurt people, transform people can transform people too. I'll see you next week. Have an amazing week.
to trust him again with my heart and not be scared, looking over my shoulder when it comes to his actions because I felt betrayed by him. Help me to trust his good intentions towards me